guys? Winter Kills here, and welcome to a brand new Mermail deck profile here for the month of September, post Rise of the Duelist. Now, this is a deep sea Mermail build. I am playing more deep sea cards than normal. I think the standard usually is just, of course, the 3 copies of Deep Sea Minstrel. We all know how good that card is. But it does a little bit more, at least that I found, outside of looking at the opponent's hand and peeling away a problematic card for the remainder of the turn. There's a lot more synergy and a lot more cool plays that can be done. Are they more competitive, than running without them? That is to be debated, but there's definitely a lot of cool plays and a lot of cool combos that this deck can do, utilizing all these cards like the Deep Sea Field Spell and the Deep Sea Synchro, which my build is currently utilizing. If you guys want to see how this deck operates, I uploaded a test hand video featuring this deck a few weeks ago, so I highly recommend you give that a look before or after this video. And before we get into it, of course, a quick shout out to Imperium Duelist. If you guys are interested in picking up some amazing spell and trap themed dice like these ones here, MST and Scapegoat, they've got, Raigeki, Harpy's Feather Duster, Solemn Judgment, and so many more. They've got an amazing selection of cloth playmats on their site as well. They've got deck boxes, sleeves, and so much more. Check them out at the link in the description and use that discount code WinterKills10 off at checkout to save 10% off your entire order. And of course, if you guys are buying anything on TCG Player, do not forget to use my affiliate link to them down in the description below as well. And if you guys want deck profiles like this early, consider hitting that blue join button down below to become a member of the channel today. Alright, so as per usual, we'll do a quick overview of the entire profile before we go into the more in-depth look. So we have 3 copies of Teus, 1 copy of Mermail Abyss Megalo, 1 copy of Mermail Abyss Pike, and 1 copy of Mermail Abyss Gund. Then we have 3 copies of Deep Sea Diva. Following that, 3 copies of Atlantean Heavy Infantry. Then from there, we have 3 copies of Neptibus, the Atlantean Prince. Then we have 3 copies of Atlantean Dragoons, 3 copies of the all-important Deep Sea Minstrel. Following that, 3 copies of Swap Frog and 1 Ronin Totem. Then 1 Lapis Dragon, and then last but not least, 1 copy of Fishborg Launcher, and that rounds out our monster lineup. And as we head into the spell lineup, I want to make one remark. Yes, your eyes are not deceiving you. There is no Mooling Glacia in the main deck. Then moving forward, we have 3 copies of Megalanica, the Deep Sea City. Then following that, 3 copies of Deep Sea Aria, 2 copies of Moray of Greed, 1 Pot of Avarice, 1 1-for-1, 1 Terraforming, 1 Upstart Goblin, and 1 Abyss Scale of the Mizuchi, and that rounds out our spell lineup. Now we'll move into the extra deck. And for the extra deck, we'll start with our Xyz monsters, which consist of 1 Mermail Abyss Gaios, 1 Squallow Bahamut or Bahamut Shark, 1 Abyss Dweller, and 1 Totally Awesome. Now we'll go to the Synchro lineup, where we have 1 Formula Synchron, 1 Deep Sea Prima Donna, 1 Adamancipator Risen Dragite, 1 Ravenous Crocodragon Arquetus, and 1 Satellite Warrior. And then last but not least, we have our Link monsters, which consist of 1 Marincess Great Bubble Reef, 1 Bujinki Ahashima, 1 Mermail Abyssalacia, 1 Crystron Halqifibrax, 1 Mistar Boy, and 1 Marincess Coral Anemone. That rounds out our extra deck, and with it, the whole main and extra deck. Now we'll go into the deck profile again. This time around, we're going to do it a lot slower, but a lot more in-depth. So if you want to get any reasonings behind any of the card choices I am playing in here, or how any certain interactions work, stick around for this portion of the video. So as for usual with all my Mermail profiles, we start things off with Mermail Abyss Teus, the most cost-effective Mermail in the entire archetype. Basically, only needs to discard 1 water monster to special summon himself, and then when he is special summoned, we can add 1 level 4 or lower Mermail monster from our deck to our hand. A lot of really good 2-card combos stem from this card, especially when taking into account that of Atlantean Dragoons, because oftentimes we can grab our really powerful normal summon in terms of Deep Sea Diva or Neptibus, and also get an additional card on top of that to pair with the resolution of our Neptibus to get us more plays from there. So Teus has just always been a mainstay at 3 and probably always will continue to be, at least in my opinion. Then we have just 1 lone copy of Mermail Abyss Megalo. The playstyle of this build is changed drastically from any other list that I've played in recent times, I should say. And Megalo really isn't needed so much so, outside of just your main combo. In some cases, he isn't needed even. The main reason I play him, though, is he can be a lifesaver in some situations where you need, to resolve multiple things. He can trigger double Dragoons off of just one special summon. He searches you Abyss Scale of the Mizuchi, which can negate Forbidden Droplet, Triple Tactics Talent, can negate Super Polymerization, Dark Lure No More. The list goes on. So the fact that he can search that card out is pretty nice, and he does help to facilitate OTKs with his, Tribute to Attack Twice effect. Not only can it trigger Atlantean effects like Heavy Infantry, Nebdibus, or Dragoons, but it can help put on a lot of extra damage, especially when this card can attack twice at 3,200. If you take into account additional boosts from a Starboy or Alacia, the OTKs can add up very quickly. Then we have one copy of Mermail Abyss Pike, a very good searchable normal summon to have as a plan B off of your Teus. I've said this in previous Mermail deck profiles. I think having a good searchable normal summon off Teus is very good, because Teus, yes, is a great card, but only so when you really have Dragoons paired with it. Otherwise, you're just breaking even with its effect, and if you're going to break even for, just to resolve him, to get him on board, you might as well grab a card that you can actually do something with that has the potential to trigger other effects in your hand. So one Pike, and then this card can be searched directly off of the Teus if you have an optimal discard like Dragoons, or if you do have to go down the rabbit hole of grabbing Pike as a normal summon, you can discard off your Pike to search Gun for a follow-up, or you can search Deep Sea Minstrel, whatever you want. So Gun is a good secondary option as well. Then we have 3 copies of Deep Sea Diva, the most powerful yet fragile normal summon in the entire deck. Basically, when it's normal summoned, we can special summon 1 level 3 or lower Sea Serpent type monster from their deck. So it's pretty much always going to be that of Neptibus to send an Atlantean to add an Atlantean from deck to hand. The greatest thing about this card in this current day and age of the format and Yu-Gi-Oh! In general is that it is a very good play starter. It's a fantastic starter for this deck in general, but it also happens to be a tuner, so we just sort of fit right in, with all the Halka-Fibrax shenanigans, because we're lucky that we don't really need to play any outside tuner cards like Olion or Jet Synchron, or really whatever, because, our starter card, our bread and butter starter card, also just happens to be a tuner, so we're very lucky to have that. Then we have 3 copies of Atlantean Heavy Infantry. Basically, when it is discarded or sent to the graveyard to activate the effect of a water monster, we can target 1 face-up card opponent controls and destroy it. That's not all it does, though. Basically, it says during your main phase, you can normal summon 1 level 4 or lower Sea Serpent type monster in addition to your normal summon set. So this card I really like playing at 3. I know some builds have adopted the new ratio of playing just 3 Dragoons and 1 Infantry, but that really just kind of pigeonholes you into having a very bad late game where arguably your best normal summon in the entire deck becomes extremely lackluster, because in some cases you might not even be able to resolve its effect, especially with Minstrel running around and being as prevalent as it is, and especially with the way this build works, we can easily resolve all 3 Dragoons in a given turn. So having extra resources in the main deck for a card like Prince to be able to resolve and clear cards in the process is nice. The double normal summon effect I take advantage of quite a bit. If I ever open these 2 cards together, I always try to do the infantry into Diva, or if I open up Prince with Diva, I always try to go Diva into infantry to get the additional normal summon on Prince, because it just gives you more bodies on board to work with at the end of the day. And again, having built-in searchable core removal is very, very nice. Now we'll move into the rest of the Atlantean monsters. Here we have 3 copies of Neptibus, the Atlantean Prince. Basically, once per turn while it's on the field, we can send an Atlantean from our deck to the graveyard to add an Atlantean from our deck to the graveyard, except itself. So just trigger Dragoons like crazy. It's very, very powerful. Can be a part of a lot of 1-card combos by sending Dragoons, adding a Dragoons, and adding a Lapis Dragon, something the Lapis Dragon going into that of Halka-Fibrax. And again, just another example of having nice built-in searchable combo facilitators with this deck. But again, really not so much to say about this card. It's just a fantastic starter and facilitates our entire engine by being able to quickly resolve that of Atlantean Dragoons. Speaking of Atlantean Dragoons, we have 3 copies here. No brainer. If this card is sent to the graveyard to activate a water monster's effect, we can add a sea serpent type monster from our deck to our hand, except itself. It is not a once per turn, so we can resolve this card as many times as possible. Then we have 3 copies of Deep Sea Minstrel. Now, with this particular build anyways, this card serves more than one role. Normally, it can serve as a starter by being able to get a water monster into the graveyard to make a Deep Sea Aria live while taking a look at the opponent's hand. B, it can be a quick way to trigger Atlantean Dragoons to while also take a look at the opponent's hand. Or even C, I guess, just being able to get important hand information out of our opponent to be able to take cards that can end our turn essentially out of their hand. Problematic cards out of their hand until the end phase. Cards like Nibiru, Infinite Impermanence, whatever it may be, Deep Sea Minstrel can help sort of clear out the roadblocks before we have to experience going through them. But for this build particularly, we can take advantage of Deep Sea Minstrel's other effect. If this card is special summoned, we can send the top 3 cards of our deck to the graveyard, then target 1 level 4 or lower water monster in our graveyard, except itself, as cost, place it on top or bottom of the deck. So basically what we can do in combination with the Megalannica field spell is stack a Dragoons to the top of our deck, revive this off of the Marincess Coral Anemone, mill a Dragoons, get a search, put a Dragoons back in the deck in the process off of Minstrel's effect, and go right into Halka Fibrax. So it can help get us an extra extender when we need to without really changing the game plan more than you would think. Moving on, we have the entire Frog package. So we have 3 copies of Swap Frog, and of course with that, 1 copy of Ronin Totem. So the reason I like this engine with this build particularly is much like how we can, take advantage of Minstrel's second effect to trigger Dragoons. We can do the same thing with this engine in combination with the field spell, is basically we can stack a Swap Frog if we already have a Ronin in our grave, or vice versa. We can dump a Ronin if we already have a Swap Frog in grave, and just help to make this engine live a lot faster. And it also works very well just again to get easy link fodder, and of course just making totally awesome naturally is always nice as well. And I really couldn't fit any other water extenders in here, none that really made sense anyways. I guess if you really didn't want to run these, you could just run more hand traps instead. Then moving forward, we just have 2 tuners with the main deck here. 1 Lapis Dragon, which of course if it is added from the deck to the hand, we can reveal this card and special summon it. If this card is added from the graveyard to hand, we can basically reveal it and special summon it, but banish it when it leaves the field. Fishborg Launcher being our main target to summon off Halka Fibrax, and I've bumped it down to 1 to be able to fit in the Megalannica package with Terraforming to be under 40 cards, or be, at 40 cards essentially. Fishborg Launcher is a great card to be able to summon off Halka Fibrax because not only is it water, so if we do draw it, we can discard it off of cards like Pike, Teus, or Megalo, or even Deep Sea Minstrel. But since everything is pretty much water within the deck, we can just revive himself out of the graveyard to make more synchro plays with, or make more link plays. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look at our spells, where we have, first of all, 3 copies of Megalannica, the Deep Sea City. Basically, I don't want to say heart and soul, but a pretty important engine piece with this deck, with at least this particular build anyways. It says when this card is activated, we can place 1 water monster from your deck on top of your deck. So again, that sort of pairs well with Deep Sea Minstrel, being able to use Deep Sea Minstrel's effect to mill the top 3 and then recycle 1 back into the deck. So we can basically guarantee a Dragoons search with these 2 cards combined. Then it has another effect, says once per turn you can target 1 water monster you control, increase its level by 1 or 2 until the end of this turn, even if this card leaves the field. And lastly, once per turn during your main phase, if you special summon a water synchro monster, you can look at your opponent's hand, and if you do, banish 1 card from it face up until the end phase. So this card does a lot of things, 3 effects to be exact. And the main synergy there, of course, is being able to stack the deck to use in combination with Deep Sea Minstrel. But you can also do a little bit more with it. Again, modify levels for Synchro or Xyz plays. And you could even go so far as to rip more cards out of the opponent's hand and even shuffle them back into the deck with Prima Donna, which we'll talk about later. Then we also have 3 copies of Deep Sea Aria, which basically says we can banish a water monster in our graveyard to add a level 4 or lower Sea Serpent from our deck to our hand. So Minstrel helps make this card live very easily. Same thing with Pike and Megalo. Swap Frog also does as well. Just a way to get water monsters into the grave without having to burn our normal summon can help facilitate this card. Increase our consistency of being able to start with things like Deep Sea Diva or Neptibus. So I wanted to max out for consistency's sake. 2 copies of Moray Agreed. You could play Pot of Extravagance in this deck, but it does take away a bit of the creativity that you can have within the extra deck, so I'm still sticking with Moray Agreed as our main motive of draw power. Then 1 Pot of Avarice, as we do go through our engine pieces very quickly. That of Dragoons, Megalo, Deep Sea Diva, whatever it may be, so having a Pot of Avarice at the ready is very great, to be able to recycle said cards. 1 for 1, again, the 4th copy of Neptibus. Then we have a copy of Terraforming, of course, to search our only field spell in the deck, Megalanica. 1 Upstart Goblin to get the deck below the 40 card count. And 1 Abyssgale, the Mizuchi, we talked about this earlier, can turn off Forbidden Droplet, Triple Tactics Talent, Dark Lure No More, Super Polymerization, you name it, because it negates the card on the resolution, not on the activation. Those cards say we cannot respond to them with card effects. Dark Lure No More says we can't respond with monster effects, so it really doesn't matter. But Super Polymerization says your opponent cannot activate effects in response. Forbidden Droplet, if they discard a spell, we cannot activate spell effects in response. This card does not activate in response, it activates on the resolution of the card. It negates that effect, so this card, very, very powerful. For those reasons, and of course the attack boost of 800 is welcomed as well, especially when paired with a card like Megalo or Mermail Abyssalacia. Now we'll go into the extra deck. We'll start with the Link Monsters, Marincess Coral Anemone. We talked about the interaction with Deep Sea Minstrel and how we can revive this off of Minstrel and, trigger its effect, which is the whole gimmick of this build. So Anemone is pretty important. Definitely want to play 1 in this deck because that's really the only way we can revive Anemone out of the graveyard to trigger its effect. So Coral Anemone is fantastic, and again, you can just link the Anemone and the Minstrel, which happens to be a tuner, into Halqifibrax to continue comboing as normal. You do get locked into water monsters, but it isn't a big deal because we really only play water monsters in the main deck, and any water monsters, any non-water monsters, I should say, that we're summoning during our opponent's turn. So 1 Anemone, 1 Mastar Boy. This card allows you to be able to go from a card like Anemone into Alacia, because we can't use Cyberse to get into Alacia, but we can use Aqua. And the only way we can link this into basically Alacia is by going through Mastar Boy first. So you kind of have to go, into Mastar Boy, then into Alacia. But, Mastar Boy can still be, kind of handy in of its own right. Alacia, a staple in the extra deck as far as I'm concerned. It gives 500 attack and defense to whatever it points to. During the opponent's turn, we can discard a card to add a Mermail from our deck to our hand. And then if in its possession is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, we can send a water monster from the deck to the graveyard and then target a water monster in our graveyard, special summon it. Then we have Halqifibrax, of course, mainstay for a lot of combos. Ahashima, this card comes up a lot when you do have the Infantry and the Deep Sea Diva play, because they are monsters with the same level, so we can summon this card. Then it says if this card is link summoned, you can special summon 2 monsters with the same level, 1 from your hand and 1 from your graveyard, but negate their effects, and immediately after this effect resolves, Ixie summon 1 Ixie's monster using those 2 monsters, so instant Bahamut Shark or Dweller. And then if a monster that it points to detaches a Ixie's material as part of its effect, you can destroy a spell trap card your opponent controls. So that effect can come in handy in some matchups, but not all. 1 Marincess Great Bubble Reef, because in some of the combos you do end on 2 Link 2 Waters, so you can climb right into this to be able to get a draw during the opponent's turn, which again, you can stack that draw, which is nice with Megalanica if you have multiple copies. And stacking the draw and getting more cards in your hand during your opponent's turn is actually pretty important with this deck, since a lot of times you're going to be ending on Abyssalacia or Ravenous Crocodile Archethus, which require, and you get more value out of the more cards you have to work with in your hand. Obviously, Alacia is optimal to discard like Dragoons to search Teus, and Archethus is optimal to discard things like Dragoons or Infantry to pop multiple cards instead of just 1. So Archethus was, I want to say, like the main reason why I wanted to play the Megalanica field spell is because I thought the main synergy I would be having is I would stack, with Megalanica and then draw whatever card I stacked with Archethus. But I figured out that really wasn't the best way to play it out. I figured the best way to play it out would be able to use Minstrel's actual effect to resolve whatever card I stacked instead. And then even so, With that being said, Minstrel stacks the card that it shuffles back into the deck or puts back in the deck either to the top or bottom. So if you have any good extenders, any good level 4 or lower extenders in your graveyard or combo pieces in your graveyard, like an additional Dragoons, or per se like a Pike or a Gund, you can stack it back to the deck with the resolution effect of Minstrel and draw that card with Crocosaur, which is huge. Yeah, so if this card is summoned, for those that don't know, basically can draw cards up to the number of non-tuners used for its summon. Then quick effect, you can discard 2 cards, target 1 card in the field, and destroy it. So if you're discarding 2 infantry, you can pop 3 cards. Satellite Warrior is basically what we're going to be going into with Formula Synchron and that of Adamancipator Risen Dragite. Dragite is a very easily accessible level 8 synchro that provides us a spell or trap negate. And we can only use it while we have water monsters in our graveyard, but spoiler alert, we play pretty much all water monsters. Formula is the main synchro monster that we can summon off of the Halka Fibrax, but not our only one now with Prima Donna. And speaking of, one Deep Sea Prima Donna, for those that don't know what this card does, first of all, it's a level 7 Synchro Tuner with 1500 attack and 2700 defense. Says your opponent cannot target a Synchro monster that used this card as material with monster effects. So I guess you could actually Synchro into Dragite with Prima Donna and Prince and then make it so your Dragite can't be targeted. So that's kind of cool, but that effect really doesn't come up too often. But its other 2 effects consist of these. The first one says you can target one of your opponent's banished cards, add to your hand, or special summon 1 level 4 or lower water monster from your deck. And if you do, add that target to their hand. And it says if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target 1 banished card, shuffle it into the deck. So this card is pretty nice because it does a couple of things. It allows you to give you some decision trees, I guess, where some cases, whatever you reveal off Minstrel, their hand really doesn't have any worthwhile cards for you to hit. So that opens up the opportunity to be able to extend further if they have no threats in their hand by going into Prima Donna, returning that card back to their hand in order to get a monster from your deck with to continue to extend with. Or vice versa, if you send this card off to the graveyard, whether it be Link summoning or Synchro summoning, you can target 1 banished card and shuffle into the deck. So if they did have a problematic card in their hand, maybe like Evenly Matched or Forbidden Droplet, whatever it may be, you can link this card off, synchro it off, whatever it may be, and put that card back into their deck so they actually lose that card. Very similar to something like a Moulin Glacier at that point. So Prima Donna, very, very cool card. Really like it and happy to play it in this build. Totally awesome, of course, to summon off the Swap Frog or Bahamut Shark. Bahamut Shark, again, just a summon, totally awesome. Abyss Dweller, easily accessible rank 4. That is a very good floodgate this format against a lot of decks and can also trigger Dragoons when detached from it. And it's a water monster and boosts all water monsters by 500 attack while it has an Ixie material that was originally water. And last but not least, 1 Big Daddy Gaios. You don't really have to play this card, but I always like playing the Loyal Gaios because sometimes this is like the last resort play. You can go into it off of Ahashima with 2 level 7s, and walking 2800 skill drain sometimes can steal you the game in simplified game states. Not always, but sometimes. So that is it for the extra deck. We'll talk about side decking real quick. First and foremost, if you take with a grain of salt when I talk about side deck cards, with locals really being the only primary method of competitive play at the moment, build your side deck accordingly. Things that I would side out, though, would probably be the Swap Frog Engine. That could easily get sided out. Same thing with a copy of Pot of Avarice and a copy of Deep Sea Aria. You could also probably look out, to side out maybe Pike as well. I'd highly recommend maybe keeping the Megalo in. You could also drop a copy of Terraforming or even a copy of Upstart as well. Although I'd recommend keeping it in so we can, have a better chance at seeing our side deck cards. But, when all is said and done, that's 4, 8, 9 slots available for side decking. 8 to 9 slots if you want to leave the Upstart in. So not so bad if you ask me. But that's going to do it for this Deep Sea Mermail deck profile. It's probably the most fun I've had playing Mermail in a little while with all the cool interactions that you can do with Minstrel, Prima Donna, and the Deep Sea City. So I appreciate all of the support you guys gave on the test hand video where I showed this deck off, and hopefully I delivered with a profile. And if you guys want to see more of this style of build, let me know in the comments, whether it be live duel, test hand videos, or combos, etc., etc. Again, let me know in the comments or by leaving a like And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, Winter Kills signing out. We'll see you guys in the next one. And now is the time to give a special shout out to my Divine level channel members here on YouTube, Academic Thick, Travis Harris, and Zors. Thank you guys so much for your continued support.